There's a reason humanity has always feared the goat god Baphomet, and it's not what the church told you. For centuries, his name has been whispered like a curse, painted in fire and shadow, branded as the face of evil. But what if I told you that everything you think you know about Baphomet symbolism is a lie? That behind the horns, the wings, and the torch burns the oldest secret of all, the secret of who you really are. The Baphomet explained through forbidden teachings is not a demon at all, but a mirror, and what it reflects is terrifying, your own divine potential. Since the 1300s, the world has burned in fear of this image. The Knights Templar Baphomet was accused of heresy, condemned for worshipping what they barely understood. But hidden beneath the ashes of their persecution lies something the church never wanted you to see, a code of balance so powerful that it could collapse the foundation of every religion built on division. That's why Baphomet and duality were declared blasphemy. Because if you understood what he truly represented, you would never need an intermediary between you and the divine again. The Baphomet occult meaning isn't about summoning demons or invoking evil. It's about awakening the light buried in your own shadow. He represents the equilibrium that every soul is destined to face, the union of what we love and what we fear, what we hide and what we are. The torch between his horns doesn't burn to curse, it burns to reveal. And the forbidden knowledge Baphomet carries is not about rebellion, but about remembering. Remembering that every human being holds within them both heaven and hell, and that wisdom lies not in choosing one, but in reconciling both. So the real question isn't why Baphomet is feared, it's who benefits from that fear. Because if the world stopped seeing him as a monster and started seeing him as a mirror, the illusion of control would fall apart overnight. The Baphomet hidden truth is simple, yet terrifying. What you reject in him, you reject in yourself. And that's why his image still haunts humanity. It's not the goat we fear, it's the reflection behind its eyes. If you're ready to question everything, your faith, your fears, your definitions of good and evil, then stay. Because in this journey, we're not here to worship or condemn Baphomet, but to decode him, to understand why this ancient symbol has survived inquisitions, wars, and excommunication, and why its meaning has never stopped evolving. This is not history. This is initiation. And by the end, you'll understand why Baphomet explained in obsessive detail might just change the way you see reality itself. Long before fear branded him as a demon, Baphomet was a secret, a code whispered in the silence of forbidden temples. Those who study the history of Baphomet soon discover that he never belonged to hell, but to the minds of the Knights Templar who sought to merge heaven and earth. His image, the goat god Baphomet, was not an idol of worship but a mirror of human balance. Every horn, every wing, every torch held above his head was geometry, a Baphomet symbolism that translated the eternal law of equilibrium. People didn't fear the symbol itself, they feared the truth it revealed, and that truth was simple: humanity fears what it secretly worships. Imagine the world of the Knights Templar Baphomet, men who walked between the sword and the spirit. In their secret gatherings, they whispered that divinity was not pure light but a union of opposites. The occult secrets Baphomet contained were not instructions for evil, but formulas of transcendence. In that ancient code, the torch represented consciousness, the wings represented ascension, and the goat head symbolized the raw, untamed force of nature. Together, they formed a living equation, the soul in perfect symmetry with the flesh. It's no wonder that such an idea terrified both kings and priests. One might say that Baphomet was the first symbol of forbidden knowledge Baphomet, knowledge that dared to suggest that light and darkness were not enemies, but twins. When people saw his face, they saw the reflection of everything they tried to suppress within themselves. That's why the Baphomet occult meaning was buried beneath centuries of fear and propaganda. The church could not allow such a revelation to survive. To accept it would mean to admit that holiness could exist within imperfection, so they renamed the symbol a demon and burned those who carried it in their hearts. But Baphomet was never about demons. He was about decoding the human condition. Think of him as a sacred cipher, the kind of Baphomet explained not through dogma, but through initiation. To look upon his image was to confront one's own divided nature, the rational and the instinctive, the divine and the animal. Anyone who truly understood that paradox could no longer be controlled by guilt or fear. In that sense, Baphomet was not an idol to worship, but a map to personal freedom, and that made him the most dangerous idea of his age. Even today, the Baphomet hidden truth continues to provoke both fascination and panic. Modern seekers, exploring Baphomet's spiritual initiation, find in him not evil but a language for inner transformation. The horns, pointing upward, symbolize the ascent of awareness. The torch between them burns like the third eye, the light of self-realization. The goat's gaze invites you to see beyond moral binaries and into the essence of your own consciousness. The moment you stop fearing him, you begin to see the Baphomet alchemy hidden beneath his skin, the fusion of opposites within yourself. There's a strange irony here. What was once condemned as blasphemy is now recognized as philosophy. The Baphomet myth versus reality reveals how humanity's greatest fears often guard its deepest truths. Those who once called him the devil failed to see that he was merely holding up a mirror. To study the Baphomet magic is to study the architecture of your own duality. The horns and the torch are not signs of rebellion against God, but symbols of understanding the totality of creation. The true sin was never curiosity, it was ignorance. And yet this story is only beginning. The birth of Baphomet marks the first ripple in a much greater revelation, a theology of balance that the world was never ready to accept. What happened next would set fire to both faith and flesh, turning a sacred code into heresy. To understand why his symbol was hunted and feared, one must step into the shadows of 1307, when the flames of persecution rose, and the Templars' forbidden idol was accused of being the devil itself. In the year 1307, silence turned to screams. The Knights Templar Baphomet became the center of the greatest spiritual scandal of the Middle Ages. Imagine a brotherhood that once guarded the secrets of kings, suddenly branded as heretics by the very church they served. Under the orders of Philip IV, their temples were raided, their treasures seized, and their minds broken under torture. The inquisitors demanded confessions about the Baphomet idol, an image said to bear both male and female aspects. Yet beneath every tortured word hid a deeper truth. The Baphomet symbolism was not blasphemy, but a sacred cipher, misunderstood and feared. As the flames consumed their flesh, the Templars spoke of an idol that embodied perfect balance, the Baphomet and duality that united opposites in divine proportion. The horns and breasts, the serene face of both man and woman, represented a harmony that religion could not tolerate. To the church, it was chaos. To the initiated, it was cosmos. The history of Baphomet reveals that his form was not a perversion of faith, but its completion, the idea that light needs shadow to exist. The inquisitors heard only corruption, but the wise heard geometry, the language of creation encoded in flesh and flame. It's easy to judge the past, yet the same fear lingers today. Whenever humanity encounters symbols that challenge its beliefs, it chooses to destroy rather than understand. The Baphomet hidden truth was never dangerous because it corrupted morality. It was dangerous because it liberated perception. The Templars' occult secrets. Baphomet spoke of a unity that transcended dogma. They saw God not as a ruler, but as a mirror reflecting through every polarity, male and female, angel and beast, heaven and earth. Such a revelation could topple any throne built on division. Some historians claim the Baphomet demon or symbol was invented by the Inquisition, a convenient lie to justify the extermination of a powerful order. But even lies carry seeds of truth. When the accused whispered Baphomet, they were invoking something beyond language, an ancient code that survived through myth. The Baphomet alchemy hidden in those syllables was a formula of transformation. Solvet coagula, dissolve and recombine. What the church feared was not the goat-headed image, but the idea that humans could achieve divine equilibrium without permission from priests. Consider what it meant to believe in Baphomet magic during an age ruled by fear. It meant seeing holiness in imperfection, wisdom in contradiction, and divinity in desire. That's what the Templars practiced in secret rituals, not worship of a demon, but meditation upon a symbol that joined heaven to earth. The Baphomet spiritual initiation demanded that one face both light and shadow within. It was never about kneeling before an idol, but about standing equally between polarities. And for that balance, they were burned alive, victims of a world addicted to extremes. The burning of the Templars was more than a political act. It was a ritual of suppression. By destroying the Knights Templar Baphomet, the Church ensured that humanity would fear its own wholeness, yet fire cannot erase truth. The ashes carried whispers that the forbidden knowledge Baphomet had been buried, not destroyed. The image would sleep beneath centuries of dust, waiting for the right mind to rediscover it. Those who listened closely could still feel the pulse of that ancient symbol in their dreams, the promise of inner reconciliation that refused to die. And indeed, centuries later, the ashes stirred again. A forgotten artist, a magician, and a philosopher named Eliphas Levi would lift the veil once more, giving shape to the Baphomet myth versus reality through ink and geometry. What had been condemned as heresy would be reborn as revelation. The goat god would rise again, not as an idol of fear, but as a symbol of initiation. For where religion saw corruption, Levi saw completion, and his drawing would ignite the modern Baphomet explained for a new age of seekers. Centuries passed before someone dared to look directly at the ashes of the Knights Templar Baphomet. That someone was Eliphas Levi, a French magician, philosopher, and artist whose mind burned with forbidden curiosity. In 1854, he drew what history would call the modern Baphomet, the goat-headed hermaphrodite seated between darkness and light. To Levi, this was no demon, but the living equation of existence itself, the embodiment of Baphomet symbolism and Baphomet alchemy. His vision resurrected what the Church had buried, the idea that every soul contains both heaven and hell. And for that, his pen became as revolutionary as fire. When Levi looked upon the myth, he didn't see corruption, he saw completion. In his eyes, Baphomet explained the balance that all religions had forgotten. One hand pointed up, one hand down, as above, so below. The torch between the horns burned as the divine mind, the light of self-awareness. The wings spoke of transcendence, while the goat's feet rested on the earth, spirit and matter in eternal embrace. Levi's Baphomet occult meaning was clear. Man's destiny was not to destroy his shadow, but to integrate it. The symbol's beauty was its danger, because it made people realize they were far more than their faith allowed them to be. Levi called this revelation the synthesis of all opposites. He believed Baphomet's spiritual initiation was not a ritual, but a recognition, the awakening of one's inner duality. In that moment, the symbol became psychological. The Baphomet and duality within each person became the battlefield of consciousness. To fight it was to remain in ignorance. To accept it was to enter illumination. Levi's drawing became a map for seekers who dared to face themselves completely, horns, wings, torch, and all. And so, the Baphomet hidden truth began to re-emerge, clothed not in darkness, but in revelation. But Levi's work was not without consequence. His Baphomet magic spread through secret orders, mystical societies, and later modern occultism. To some, it became a symbol of rebellion against dogma. To others, a tool for personal alchemy. The Church condemned it once more, claiming the goat god Baphomet was Satan himself. Yet those who read Levi's texts understood the irony. The same institution that demonized him was built on the same duality he described. The image, once feared as blasphemy, became an emblem for the eternal dance between shadow and light. The Baphomet myth versus reality continued to evolve. Artists, mystics, and magicians saw in Levi's drawing a mirror of their own quest for wholeness. For some, it represented liberation. For others, madness. Levi himself warned that to gaze upon Baphomet was to confront the soul's deepest contradictions. This was not a symbol for the faint of heart. It was a portal. Through Baphomet alchemy, he taught that transformation begins when opposites cease their war. Light and darkness, reason and instinct, divine and profane, all were threads of the same cosmic fabric. If you've ever stood between two opposing choices and felt both were true, you've already met Baphomet. Levi understood that the Baphomet occult secrets were not locked in temples, they were within the psyche. The goat's serene face invites the seeker to embrace paradox without collapsing under it, to accept that creation itself is both holy and wild, and in that acceptance, a new consciousness is born, one capable of seeing the divine not in perfection, but in totality. That's the forbidden knowledge Baphomet concealed in every line Levi drew, Yet Levi's resurrection of the symbol was only the beginning, for hidden within his geometry lay an equation older than his own hand, one that described not just balance, but cosmic law itself. In the next revelation, the Baphomet explained will go beyond history and mysticism, stepping into the hermetic equation of light and darkness, the very formula that unites all creation in one eternal breath. If there's one truth the ancients guarded most jealously, it's that light and darkness are not enemies. They are lovers in disguise. The Baphomet occult meaning captures this secret perfectly, the union of opposites as the engine of creation. Levi's drawing wasn't meant to glorify shadows, but to remind the world that shadow is simply light that forgot itself. The Baphomet symbolism of the torch between horns is no accident. It burns not to banish darkness, but to reveal its purpose. The goat god Baphomet sits calmly between the pillars of mercy and severity, embodying the hermetic law that equilibrium is the highest virtue. Those who fear him fear balance itself. In hermetic philosophy, every force in the universe exists in polarity, heat and cold, spirit and matter, good and evil. The Baphomet, explained, becomes a living diagram of this law. His wings stretch toward the heavens, while his hooves rest upon the earth. His masculine and feminine aspects intertwine in perfect symmetry. He teaches that divinity is not found in denial, but in integration. That's why Baphomet alchemy is so revolutionary. It transforms contradiction into harmony. The wise understand this, the fearful call it blasphemy. In truth, both are right, because enlightenment always begins where fear and understanding meet. When seekers talk about Baphomet spiritual initiation, they're not speaking of worshipping a horned god. They're talking about reconciling their own extremes, turning conflict into awareness. The hermetic axiom, solve et coagula, carved on Baphomet's arms, is the formula for this transformation. Dissolve what you are not, it whispers, and reforge what remains. This is Baphomet alchemy in action, the process of breaking illusion to reach unity. The fire in his torch is not hellfire. It is the same spark that ignited the stars, the Promethean flame of consciousness itself. Those who misunderstand this law fall into the oldest trap, seeing evil where there is simply reflection. The Baphomet hidden truth is that what we call darkness is just the side of the divine we have yet to understand. In this sense, Baphomet and duality are inseparable. He is not evil, but equilibrium incarnate. The goat's gaze reminds us that both the angel and the beast are masks of the same essence. Humanity's fear of that truth is what keeps it divided, eternally at war with itself. And every time we reject part of who we are, the devil grows stronger. To live by the Baphomet magic is to accept that enlightenment is not white light. It's a spectrum, a rainbow born from the collision of sun and storm. In this way, Baphomet occult secrets mirror hermetic teachings, that creation depends on contrast, and that balance, not purity, sustains the universe. When a person stops running from their shadow and learns to listen to it, they experience the essence of forbidden knowledge Baphomet. It's not about summoning demons, but summoning the courage to face yourself. That's why every true mystic eventually meets him, not in ritual, but in reflection. The Church taught the masses to fear this union, calling it perversion or sin. But Hermeticism teaches that separation itself is the illusion. Baphomet mythology was twisted to preserve power. Unity is dangerous to hierarchies built on division. Yet the Hermetic equation, light within darkness, darkness within light, remains unbroken. In every human heart burns a small torch of Baphomet's fire, waiting to illuminate the hidden chambers of the soul. And those who dare to see that light will find heaven hidden precisely where they were told never to look. Still, one question lingers. If balance is divine, why do humans still fear it so much? What makes integration so terrifying that entire civilizations would rather burn than embrace it? The answer lies not in theology, but in psychology. For what the Church called heresy was, in truth, the mirror of the human mind. And to face that mirror is to confront the fear of forbidden union itself. Humans have always been terrified of wholeness. The Baphomet symbolism exposes that fear like a mirror that cannot lie. We've been taught to divide everything, body from soul, good from evil, male from female. Yet the Baphomet explained shows that these opposites are not meant to fight, but to merge. That's why the goat god Baphomet is so feared. He represents the very union that religions, ideologies, and empires have forbidden. The Baphomet occult meaning is the great secret that unity equals liberation, and liberation terrifies those who profit from division. Think about it. When a person begins to integrate their shadow, to accept their instincts without shame, the whole structure of control begins to collapse. That's the forbidden knowledge Baphomet embodies. He teaches that to deny any part of yourself is to remain enslaved by it. When society labeled him a monster, it was really protecting its own illusion of purity. The Baphomet and duality is not a moral struggle, but a reconciliation. And reconciliation demands courage, the kind that burns falsehood to ashes. To see Baphomet clearly is to see yourself completely, without masks or excuses. The Baphomet hidden truth is psychological as much as it is spiritual. His image reflects the secret alchemy of the human psyche, the meeting point of instinct and intellect, desire and divinity. Those who fear Baphomet don't fear evil, they fear themselves. They fear the collapse of their inner walls, the end of us versus them, heaven versus hell. The Baphomet alchemy transmuted in that process is the essence of transformation. When opposites unite, the human becomes whole, and the soul unchained. But to reach that point, one must face the terror of integration. Every religion that condemned Baphomet was really condemning human complexity. They mistook harmony for heresy. The Baphomet spiritual initiation invites one to embrace contradiction, to understand that peace does not come from denial but from acceptance. Imagine a world where desire is not sin, where darkness is not evil, where imperfection is sacred. That's the world Baphomet points toward. But such a vision cannot exist in a society addicted to purity. So instead, they burned his followers and buried his symbol, thinking they could kill the mirror that reflected their hypocrisy. To fear Baphomet magic is to fear your own creative power, because when the mind accepts duality, it becomes limitless. Male and female, logic and emotion, chaos and order, all fuse into a single force. The occult secrets Baphomet whispered to the Templars were never about summoning demons, but about summoning equilibrium. The very idea that you could find God within your contradictions was enough to shatter centuries of dogma. That's why he became a demon, not because he was evil, but because he was free. And freedom, to the blind, looks like rebellion. Even today, modern society repeats the same pattern, demonizing whatever it cannot control. The Baphomet myth versus reality still divides opinions. Some see him as Satan, others as a symbol of awakening. But the truth is simpler and more terrifying. Baphomet is both, and neither. He exists as a code for consciousness itself, the pulse of light inside every shadow. The Baphomet explained through psychology becomes a guide for anyone seeking wholeness. You don't need a ritual, you need honesty. To face your contradictions is the truest form of initiation. And yet, humanity's fear of integration didn't end with the Middle Ages. It evolved. Institutions found new ways to project their shadows, creating systems of guilt, shame, and obedience. The Church's torch may have dimmed, but its shadow still lingers. To truly understand how that shadow took form, how balance itself was inverted into sin, we must descend into the next chapter, the Church's shadow and the inverted light. When light is forbidden, it learns to hide inside the dark. That's what happened when the Church demonized the Baphomet symbolism. The symbol that once represented balance became the ultimate enemy of faith. To preserve authority, they inverted its meaning, turning wisdom into sin and shadow into evil. Baphomet explained that divinity exists in the union of opposites, but dogma could not tolerate such freedom, so they burned it, buried it, and renamed it the devil. The goat god Baphomet became the scapegoat of everything humanity refused to see in itself: lust, chaos, intuition, rebellion. In destroying him, they only deepened their own shadow. It was never about good versus evil. It was about control versus awakening. The Baphomet occult meaning threatened to dissolve the walls between the sacred and the profane. If man could find God within himself, the Church would lose its monopoly on salvation. And so, the Baphomet and duality became dangerous, because duality meant equality. When the priests warned of demons, What they truly feared was autonomy. The forbidden knowledge Baphomet carried wasn't a spell, it was self-knowledge. And no empire built on obedience can survive a people who know themselves completely. Over centuries, this fear of balance hardened into culture. Art, scripture, and superstition reshaped Baphomet mythology into terror. The goat became the devil, the torch became hellfire, and the wings, symbols of ascension, were stripped away. Yet through every distortion, the Baphomet hidden truth survived, like a pulse beneath the floor of every cathedral. It whispered that what humanity calls sin is often just misunderstood nature, that desire is not damnation but energy, that instinct is not corruption but compass. The Baphomet alchemy, hidden in this inversion, turns oppression into awakening for those who can read between the lines. The irony is profound. While priests preached purity, they created impurity through repression. By rejecting their own shadow, they projected it outward, birthing the very evil they claimed to fight. The Baphomet magic of reflection works both ways. Suppress your darkness, and it will rule you from the shadows. Embrace it consciously, and it becomes light in disguise. The Church's greatest mistake was thinking it could separate God from the world, but the Baphomet explained through Hermetic eyes shows the opposite, that the divine is hidden precisely in what religion condemns. In truth, the Baphomet spiritual initiation is the antidote to centuries of guilt. It teaches that the light of awareness cannot exist without the darkness of experience. The moment a person accepts their shadow, the illusion of evil begins to fade. That's why mystics, saints, and heretics alike have rediscovered the Baphomet occult secrets throughout history, from the Gnostics to the modern magicians. They understood that the true devil is ignorance, and once ignorance is gone, all that remains is light reflected through the infinite facets of being. Still, humanity continues to repeat the same ritual of fear. Even now, the Baphomet myth versus reality divides minds and movements. Some invoke his name to shock, others to understand. But few realize that every accusation against him reveals more about the accuser than the accused. The Knights Templar Baphomet was never a demon hiding in temples. It was a truth hiding in plain sight, and that truth can only be rediscovered where the Church never looked, within the human mind, where light and shadow coexist eternally. And so the story turns inward. But beyond the politics, beyond religion, beyond centuries of projection, lies the secret altar, the one built not of stone but of thought. It is there that Baphomet alchemy truly begins, not in rituals or symbols, but in consciousness itself. The next revelation opens that inner gate, where the Baphomet hidden truth becomes psychological reality, the inner altar. Baphomet within the mind. Every seeker eventually learns that the real temple is not made of stone but of thought. The Baphomet symbolism speaks precisely of this. The external idol is only a reflection of an inner architecture. The goat god Baphomet lives not in caves or cathedrals, but in the corridors of human consciousness. When mystics close their eyes and enter deep meditation, they encounter him, not as a demon, but as an archetype of integration. The Baphomet explained through modern psychology reveals that he represents the reconciliation of the conscious and unconscious. He is the dream where reason meets instinct, where light negotiates with shadow. Those who embark on the Baphomet spiritual initiation often describe a strange awakening within their own minds. In moments of silence, visions arise, horns that crown awareness, a torch that burns between the eyes, wings that emerge from the spine of imagination. These are not hallucinations but symbols of awakening. The Baphomet occult meaning here is that the mind itself is the altar. Every emotion becomes an offering, every fear a teacher, every contradiction a doorway. To practice Baphomet alchemy is to transmute thoughts into understanding. In doing so, one begins to see that enlightenment is not elsewhere. It's inside, waiting for attention. Many who experience altered states, through deep breathwork, lucid dreams, or even DMT visions, speak of encountering a horned being of infinite calm. Some call it a guardian, others call it Baphomet entity, but what they truly face is the mirror of their own hidden truth. The Baphomet hidden truth shows that the mind, when unfiltered, reveals the totality of being. These visions are not about worship, they are about realization. The flame between the horns becomes the awakened mind, and the goat face, that unsettling blend of beauty and terror, is the symbol of your own complexity unveiled. It's here that Baphomet and duality cease to be theory and become experience. The seeker feels both angel and beast within, both desiring and divine. It's no longer about religion, it's about recognition. This is the core of forbidden knowledge, Baphomet, that divinity doesn't demand perfection, only awareness. When a person truly understands this, guilt dissolves. The fire that once burned as shame now burns as clarity, and from that inner fire rises peace. Not the peace of denial, but the peace of total acceptance. That's what the Baphomet explained meant all along. Wholeness as holiness. The occult secrets Baphomet guard are not rituals or spells, they're ways of perceiving. When one looks inward without fear, the horns become symbols of higher thought, the wings of imagination, and the torch of insight. Through Baphomet magic, ordinary awareness expands beyond duality. The individual begins to understand that thoughts create worlds, emotions shape energy, and perception molds reality. That's why mystics say the Baphomet alchemy happens not in fire, but in focus. Every act of mindfulness is a miniature ritual of transformation. And in those silent altars, a new kind of light is born, black and bright at once. Psychologically, this process mirrors what Carl Jung called individuation, the merging of all psychic fragments into a unified self. Baphomet becomes a metaphor for that journey. The Baphomet myth versus reality reflects the path of every human who dares to know themselves completely. Those who fear him stay fragmented. Those who accept him become whole. In modern terms, Baphomet explained is the process of integrating the shadow without being consumed by it. The devil disappears the moment you make peace with what you used to call evil, and that peace transforms perception into wisdom. But such wisdom doesn't come without a price. To see Baphomet within is to ignite the black flame of awareness, a terrifying illumination that burns away illusion. Some awaken gently, others break beneath the weight of what they find. This next step, known among initiates as the initiatory terror, is not for the faint of heart. It's the moment when knowledge turns into fire, and only those who endure its light discover who they truly are. That is the next threshold, the initiatory terror facing the black flame. There comes a moment in every true initiation when knowledge stops being comfortable. The seeker who dares to look into the mirror of Baphomet symbolism meets the black flame, the terrifying light of self-awareness. It burns not on the altar, but between the eyes, like the torch on the goat god Baphomet. This is the fire Prometheus stole from the gods, the light that cannot be possessed without transformation. The Baphomet explained through initiation shows that this flame is consciousness unveiled, pure, unfiltered, and overwhelming. It is the moment when you realize that enlightenment is not gentle, it's surgical. Those who face this flame describe it as both agony and ecstasy. The Baphomet occult meaning teaches that illumination is not found in peace, but in friction, where illusion meets truth. This fire exposes every falsehood, every pretense, every mask. It strips the seeker bare, revealing the raw essence beneath. This is the true Baphomet spiritual initiation, the death of who you think you are. In that burning, the soul discovers that pain and clarity are twins. The Baphomet alchemy works through paradox. What feels like destruction is, in truth, rebirth. The Baphomet and duality within this stage become unbearable. One moment, the initiate feels divine, the next, monstrous. The mind oscillates between light and shadow until it learns they are the same current seen from different angles. The forbidden knowledge Baphomet unveils is that even terror can be holy. That's why mystics call this fire the black light, because it illuminates by consuming. The Baphomet hidden truth is that awareness grows only by burning away ignorance. Many who reach this stage turn back, unable to withstand the heat of their own awakening. But for those who endure, something extraordinary happens. When resistance collapses, fear dissolves. The seeker realizes that the Baphomet magic of the black flame was never punishment. It was purification. The horns once feared as infernal become symbols of expanded perception. The wings unfold as understanding. The Baphomet explained through this ordeal reveals that the true devil is denial and the true angel is acceptance. What was once darkness becomes light in disguise. It's here that the initiate crosses from belief into knowing, from worship into wisdom. In this crucible, Baphomet alchemy becomes personal transformation. The fire refines the spirit the way heat tempers steel. Every doubt becomes ash, every truth diamond. The occult secrets Baphomet guards are not external spells but internal processes. The mastery of emotion, thought, and will. The black flame does not destroy, it clarifies. Those who pass through it emerge luminous, grounded, and unafraid. They no longer worship symbols, they embody them. The Baphomet myth versus reality dissolves entirely, replaced by direct experience of what he represents. Total consciousness. To the uninitiated, this looks like madness, but madness is just awakening too fast. The Knights Templar Baphomet knew this danger. That's why their rites were secret. The black flame had to be faced gradually, guided by understanding. Today, modern seekers rediscover it through meditation, shadow work, or even spontaneous spiritual crises. The process hasn't changed, only the language. The Baphomet hidden truth whispers the same message across centuries. You are both the fire and the one it burns, and once that is known, fear loses its power. And yet, beyond this trial lies a deeper secret, one written not in pain, but in code. The very phrase carved on Baphomet's arms, Solve et coagula, hides the next revelation, the formula for dissolving illusion and reforging the self into wholeness. What begins as terror becomes transformation, and what burns now will soon become light. The next key awaits in the esoteric code, Solve et coagula decoded. On Baphomet's forearms, two Latin words gleam like sacred scars, Solve et coagula. To the untrained eye, they look decorative, but to the initiate, they are the entire philosophy of the Baphomet symbolism. Solve, to dissolve, coagula, to reform. Together, they describe the secret rhythm of existence. Every death births life, every chaos breeds order, every ending hides a beginning. The Baphomet explained through these words becomes the blueprint of transformation itself. What seems destructive is only preparatory, like the melting of metal before it becomes a blade. The Baphomet alchemy carved into flesh is the reminder that creation requires destruction. In alchemical language, solve means to break down illusion, to dissolve everything false. This is the first act of Baphomet's spiritual initiation. The seeker dismantles their borrowed identities, beliefs, and fears until nothing remains but awareness itself. That's why the Baphomet occult meaning speaks of fire and dissolution. The black flame purifies by revealing truth. Only when you let go of what you are not can you remember what you are. Baphomet and duality again become one principle, destruction as creation, loss as liberation. This is not philosophy. It's the universal law coded into every transformation. Then comes coagula, the art of reassembly. Once illusion has been burned away, consciousness begins to reforge itself in alignment with truth. The forbidden knowledge Baphomet teaches that awakening is not about escape from the world, but participation in it with new eyes. You dissolve ego only to rebuild identity consciously. That's the secret Baphomet magic hidden in this phrase, the power to choose who you become. Solve frees you. Coagula defines you. The two are not opposites, but phases of one eternal pulse, expansion and contraction, inhale and exhale, death and rebirth. Mystics say this code is older than religion. It's written into matter itself. Stars explode and reform. Forests burn and regrow. Souls die and awaken. The Baphomet hidden truth is that this process never ends. To resist it is to suffer. To accept it is to evolve. The Baphomet explained through Hermetic wisdom shows that the universe itself practices solve et coagula endlessly. Everything transforms, and nothing is lost. This realization is liberation, the moment when fear becomes faith, and destruction reveals its beauty. In this way, the Baphomet alchemy mirrors the very breath of God. Modern psychology even reflects this law. Every personal breakthrough begins with breakdown. Every healing requires disintegration before reconstruction. Carl Jung's shadow work, mindfulness, even the stages of grief, all echo solve et coagula. The Baphomet occult secrets simply put this universal process into symbolic form. To dissolve is to awaken, to reform is to create. When a person understands this deeply, They stop fearing change. They see chaos as sacred, the forge of transformation. That's why the goat god Baphomet remains such a timeless teacher. His body is philosophy sculpted into myth. The Baphomet myth versus reality turns this from superstition into revelation. The church called it heresy because it removed the need for salvation intermediaries. If every human can dissolve and rebuild themselves, no one needs forgiveness, only awareness. That is the true Baphomet spiritual initiation, taking full responsibility for one's evolution. Solve the ignorance imposed by dogma, coagula the wisdom born of experience. The Baphomet alchemy thus becomes practical. Meditate, reflect, act, break, heal, become. The universe is not static. It is an eternal crucible, and you are both fire and clay. And when that truth settles, something profound occurs. The seeker no longer seeks. They realize that Baphomet was never a demon, never a god, but a mirror of the divine process itself. The horns, torsion, and wings all point toward one final revelation, the paradox that transcends morality, religion, and fear. What lies beyond solve et coagula is not just understanding, but embodiment. The next and final mystery reveals that eternal truth, the goat beyond good and evil. When the initiate finally crosses the threshold of solve et coagula, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Baphomet was never meant to be worshipped or feared, only understood. The Baphomet explained through centuries of distortion reveals itself as a paradox too vast for dogma. He is the teacher who says nothing but shows everything. The Baphomet symbolism of horns and torch, wings and hooves becomes transparent, no longer an idol but an equation. In that realization, fear collapses. The goat god Baphomet is no longer the devil. He is the mirror through which humanity sees its own divine reflection. What was once heresy now becomes harmony. To look upon Baphomet without judgment is to step beyond morality. The Baphomet occult meaning dissolves the illusion of good and evil, revealing them as two sides of the same current. The Baphomet alchemy does not destroy ethics, it deepens them, replacing obedience with understanding. When you stop dividing the world into saints and sinners, you begin to live consciously. That's the forbidden knowledge Baphomet has always guarded. Enlightenment is not purity, but perception. To see all things as sacred is to end war within the soul. That's why he sits calmly, surrounded by flames, untouched, because he has nothing left to resist. This is the moment when Baphomet and duality cease to exist. What once felt like conflict becomes coherence. The seeker realizes that the devil was never external. It was the shadow cast by our own fear of freedom. The Baphomet hidden truth is not in rebellion against God, but in union with creation itself. The horns point to heaven not as defiance, but as understanding. The wings spread to remind us that gravity itself is an illusion of perspective. Through Baphomet spiritual initiation, duality dissolves into unity, and unity births transcendence. This is the peace that religion cannot offer, because it cannot control it. In that state, the Baphomet magic becomes creative rather than reactive. The awakened soul stops asking for permission to exist. Instead, it becomes the artist of its own destiny. The occult secrets Baphomet always pointed to this, that the divine is not something you find, but something you remember. The horns symbolize awareness expanding beyond boundaries. The torch burns with intelligence, and the wings represent choice. This is Baphomet explained not as mythology, but as consciousness evolving beyond fear. Every seeker becomes both creator and creation, both question and answer. Beyond good and evil lies clarity, not apathy, but alignment. The Baphomet myth versus reality teaches that moral systems crumble when confronted with pure awareness. Baphomet does not replace God, he completes the equation. He is the bridge between the sacred and the profane, between logic and chaos. To the church, he was blasphemy. To the mystic, he is revelation. In the end, Baphomet alchemy becomes the art of living without denial, embracing the entire spectrum of being. That's why his image endures, not as a curse, but as a compass pointing inward. And so the initiate understands what few ever dare to see, that the forbidden light was never external at all. It was the same spark that lives within every soul, waiting to be recognized. The Baphomet hidden truth is that enlightenment is not about escaping darkness, but mastering it. When shadow and light embrace, the war of opposites ends, and peace dawns naturally. The Baphomet symbolism reminds us, you are what you seek. That's not philosophy, it's realization. The goat beyond good and evil is the human beyond illusion. And as the story fades, one whisper remains, the same one that echoed through the Templar chambers and Levi's ink-stained pages. It says, the one you feared was always you. The Baphomet explained becomes complete yet infinite, but his revelation does not end here, because every initiation births another, and what follows this understanding is not silence, but transformation. The seeker now becomes the torchbearer, ready to share what was once forbidden. And so begins the final act, the invitation to awaken. Why is Baphomet so feared? Explained in obsessive detail. So now that you've seen what hides behind the Baphomet symbolism, ask yourself, what is it that you truly fear, the demon or the reflection? Because the Baphomet explained through history, mysticism and psychology is not an invitation to darkness, but to honesty. He doesn't demand worship, he demands awareness. To see him clearly is to see the Baphomet hidden truth, that light and shadow were never enemies, only teachers. And when you finally stop running from what you fear, you begin to remember who you are. The goat god Baphomet has always been a test, not of faith, but of perception. The real initiation begins the moment you stop labeling and start understanding. You can study the Baphomet occult, meaning read every grimoire and secret manuscript, but unless you face the mirror, the mystery remains external. The forbidden knowledge Baphomet carries is internal. It lives in every contradiction you refuse to accept. Integration is not easy, but it's freedom. And freedom is the one thing no religion, no ideology, no system can give you. So look closer. Where in your life have you divided yourself? Where have you denied your instincts, your voice, your truth, because someone told you they were wrong? The Baphomet spiritual initiation starts when you stop apologizing for being whole, when you stop separating sacred from human, when you stop pretending that light exists without darkness. That's when the Baphomet alchemy begins, when every fear becomes fire, every wound becomes wisdom. The horns and the torch are symbols of that rebirth, waiting for you to claim them. But remember, this knowledge is not meant to comfort you. It's meant to awaken you. The Baphomet and duality teach that growth requires discomfort, that truth burns before it heals. So if this journey stirred something in you, confusion, awe, or even resistance, that's good. It means you've begun the work, because the Baphomet explained was never just a story, it's a mirror, and once you've looked into it, you can't unsee yourself. So what will you do with what you've learned? Will you bury it like the church did, or will you let it reshape the way you see the world? The Baphomet magic is the courage to hold both light and darkness in the same breath and call them divine. That is the real initiation, not to worship the symbol but to embody it, because Baphomet was never outside you. He's been waiting inside you all along. If this journey made you think differently, if it challenged what you believed or opened your eyes to something deeper, then don't let it end here. There's much more to uncover, more symbols to decode, more truths to reclaim. Subscribe, activate the notifications, and join this circle of seekers, because the next revelation begins where fear ends. And remember, the one you feared was always you.